March 24th, 2013 began like any other Sunday in downtown Cleveland. The streets were quieter than usual, the way they always are when the work week hasn't started yet. The offices were mostly empty. The sidewalks had that particular stillness that only exists on weekends in business districts, that hollow kind of quiet that makes everything feel slightly paused. Aliza Sherman stood on the sidewalk outside 55 Erieview Plaza, checking her phone, pulling her coat a little tighter against the cooling air. She was 53 years old, a fertility nurse at the Cleveland Clinic, someone who had spent her career helping other people build their families. She had 4 children of her own. She was kind in the way that people describe when they mean it, not as a pleasantry, but as a fact. Her best friend Jan would later say that Aliza was just sunshine, that she tried to make a better life for herself and for everyone around her. And for her patients, she was often the very first person present at the beginning of their family stories. That Sunday, though, Aliza was not thinking about work. She was thinking about the next day. Her divorce trial was scheduled to begin Monday morning, and she had arranged to meet her attorney, Gregory Moore, at his office to finalize the last remaining details. It had been a long and difficult process, the kind that takes up space in your mind, even when you are trying to think about something else. 30 years of marriage to Dr. Sanford Sherman was coming to an end through a legal process that had grown contentious and exhausting. She had texted her brother just 10 days earlier saying the trial was in 2 weeks. Hopefully, she wrote, there is life after death. She meant it as a hopeful thing. A second chapter was waiting. She was almost there. CCTV cameras mounted on the surrounding buildings captured her pacing gently along the sidewalk, occasionally glancing at her phone. It was still light outside, just past 5 in the afternoon. She had been waiting for nearly an hour. The messages she sent that afternoon went unanswered for long stretches. At 5:15, she typed that she had been standing outside the building for 45 minutes, asking if he would be there soon, mentioning the cold, wondering how to get in. A minute later, she sent the same question again. A few minutes after that, she sent another message saying that if he was inside, why hadn't he let her in, that she was going back to her car, that he should text her when the door was open. There was a response at some point, telling her he was already there. No one came down to meet her. A hooded figure entered the edge of the camera frame. Their face was completely covered. They were dressed entirely in black. Aliza clearly did not see them approaching. By the time she did, there was no time. Passerby heard a woman screaming. When they looked over, Aliza was on the ground, bleeding heavily. She managed to say 3 words. I am dying. The passerby called 911 and stayed with her, following every instruction the dispatcher gave. Aliza was transported to MetroHealth Medical Center. At 6:14 in the evening, she was pronounced dead. She had been stabbed 11 times. The wounds were on her head, her neck, her back, and her right arm. The next morning, that stretch of downtown Cleveland sidewalk was sealed off with tape and traffic diverted around it. Most people rushing to school or work had no idea what had happened there. What they passed unknowingly was the beginning of an investigation that would take more than 12 years to reach its next chapter. Investigators established almost immediately that this was not a robbery. Her phone was still in her possession. Her jewelry had not been touched. There was no indication of sexual assault. Whatever drove someone to stab a woman 11 times on a public street in broad daylight on a Sunday afternoon, it was not opportunistic. It felt deliberate. It felt planned. The surveillance footage was their most promising lead. It captured Aliza's attacker running away from the scene in dark clothing. Face fully concealed, investigators could assess approximate height and build, but nothing more. No identifying features. Stirs. The footage existed, but it could only take them so far. Police canvassed the surrounding blocks, knocked on every door, spoke to every business they could find. But Sunday had worked against them. Most of the offices in the area had been closed. Witnesses were few. Phone records placed Aliza near the building, communicating with Gregory Moore right up until the attack. And those same records would eventually become central to the investigation. In the absence of any obvious motive, the case occupied a strange and unsettling space. Aliza had no known enemies. The divorce, while difficult, had not escalated to anything threatening, at least not on the surface. Her family, her colleagues, her patients, they all described someone who gave far more than she ever asked for in return. No one who knew her could explain why anyone would want her dead. The lack of answers did not stop her community from showing up. More than 600 people gathered at the Cleveland Heights Chapel to remember her. Family, friends, colleagues from the Cleveland Clinic, former patients whose children existed in the world partly because of her care. A bench was placed in the Cleveland Metro Parks in her honor. Each year on the anniversary of her death, people gathered again with signs, refusing to let her case slip quietly into the unsolved pile. But the case did not move quickly. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Then a year had passed, and there was still no weapon recovered, no confirmed suspect, and no arrest. Her best friend Jan gave interviews. She said she had spoken with Aliza around 4:30 that Sunday afternoon, just a short while before everything changed. They had their usual conversation, she said. Girl talk. Aliza had been a little anxious about the upcoming court date, but she was holding herself together the way she always did. And then the call ended the way most calls end, without ceremony, without significance. Jen said goodbye. She said, "I love you." Aliza said it back, Kihu. Neither of them knew it was the last time. That is the part that stays with you, is it not? The way ordinary moments carry weight we only recognize in hindsight. A text message, a quick phone call squeezed into a busy afternoon. Nothing that feels final until it is. In January 2016, nearly 3 years after the murder, investigators pursued a direction that had been developing quietly. A grand jury indicted Gregory Moore, Aliza's divorce attorney, on charges of tampering with evidence, obstructing justice, and making false statements to police. He was not charged with her murder at that point. The case was still publicly listed as unsolved, but the charges against him were significant enough to suggest that investigators believed he knew something he had not been willing to share. Gregory Moore was the last person Aliza had planned to meet, and he was the sole reason she was standing on that downtown sidewalk that afternoon. When detectives interviewed him, they found inconsistencies in his account of where he had been and what he remembered. He claimed to have forgotten the meeting. He claimed to have gone down to the lobby and looked outside without seeing her. Both of those claims were later shown to be false. Phone records and data placed Gregory outside the building at the time Aliza was killed. He had not been in his office, and detectives discovered that he had deleted thousands of text messages, including messages sent between himself and Aliza on the day she died. Messages sent from his phone around the time of the killing suggested he was at work, but the data told a different story. There was also this. After Aliza had been rushed to the hospital and the street had begun to fill with police tape, Gregory sent her a message asking where she was. He then used a back entrance to slip into the law offices, returning approximately an hour after he had left. At 7:32 that evening, he reconnected his phone to the network. He then called Aliza's number repeatedly until 9 o'clock. Why would a man call the number of a woman he had forgotten meeting on a phone he had only just reconnected, through a back entrance he had used to return to a building he had never claimed to leave? The charges compiled against him were extensive. One count of tampering with evidence, telecommunications fraud, possessing criminal tools, obstructing official business, falsification, 2 counts of forgery, 3 counts of making terroristic threats, 6 counts of inducing panic. Some of those charges reach back to events in 2012. Gregory had made a series of bomb threats to local courts in Yaga Lake and Cuyahoga counties, calling them in on days when he was scheduled to begin trials. 3 times in 2012, January, May, and July, court proceedings had been disrupted by threats he had placed. Each time, it was his own trial he was trying to delay. He initially pleaded not guilty to all of it. In 2017, he pleaded guilty to falsification and inducing panic. A judge sentenced him to 180 days in the county jail. The following year, facing disciplinary proceedings over his conduct, he resigned his law license. His legal career was over. Aliza's daughter, Jennifer, was present at sentencing. She said she was deeply disappointed. She said Gregory Moore had shown no remorse toward her mother or her family. She said it was concerning that they still did not know any more about what had actually happened that day. She was right. The murder itself remained officially unsolved. Years continued to pass. 5 years. 6. 8, 9, 10, 11. Alyssa's family and friends continued to gather on each anniversary. They continued to push for the investigation to remain active. Her ex-husband, Dr. Sanford Sherman, had never been charged or officially named as a suspect, though investigators had tried repeatedly to speak with him. He had retained an attorney and directed all contact through legal representation, offering nothing further. He passed away in July 2024, taking whatever he knew with him. It would have been easy, perhaps even understandable, to assume the case had gone as cold as cases get. More than a decade had passed. Key figures were gone. The footage that existed would never yield a clear image, no matter how many times it was enhanced. But the people working the case had not stopped. In June 2021, the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation received a formal request to take over the Aliza Sherman cold case investigation. BCI agents spent thousands of hours applying advanced technology and investigative techniques to everything that had already been gathered and everything that had not yet been fully explored. They worked quietly. They made no public announcements about where the investigation was heading. Then on May 2nd, 2025, the announcement came. Gregory Moore, Alice's divorce attorney, had been indicted on 1 count of aggravated murder, 1 count of conspiracy, 6 counts of murder, and 2 counts of kidnapping. United States Marshals arrested him in Texas. He was brought back to Ohio to face the charges. The indictment alleged something that, when you step back and look at the full picture, transforms the entire story. Gregory Moore had not simply lied to police about a meeting he forgot. Prosecutors alleged he had spent months planning to prevent Aliza from attending her own divorce trial, the trial scheduled to begin the morning after she was killed. The plan, according to the indictment, was initially to kidnap her, not to kill her. To kidnap her, to make her unavailable for proceedings, to delay or obstruct the divorce case the same way he had tried to delay his own past trials with bomb threats. On March 24th, 2013, Gregory sent Aliza a message at 2:31 in the afternoon, telling her to meet him at his office at 4:30. He then went to the office, swiped his access card at the entrance, and did not go inside. Instead, he disconnected his phone from the network so it could not be tracked by cell towers. He and at least one other unnamed individual had previously obtained a new phone through the law firm's Verizon business account after the bomb threat incidents. Gregory had also been given control of the firm's mobile hotspot, which allowed him to communicate without the usual digital footprint. While Aliza stood outside in the cold, sending message after message asking how to get in, someone was watching her. The indictment states that either Gregory or an unknown co-conspirator approached her from behind, chased her, and stabbed her 11 times before fleeing the scene. After she was taken to the hospital and the street sealed off, Gregory re-entered the building through a back door. He began calling her phone. He kept calling until 9 o'clock that night. On March 29th, he filed a legal motion notifying the court of Aliza's death. On April 2nd, the Sherman divorce case was dismissed. That same day, Gregory transferred the firm's mobile phone number to a different device, replacing the one he had been using on the day she was killed. One detail within the indictment continues to generate discussion among people who have followed this case closely. The footage from that Sunday afternoon shows a figure running away from the scene. It has never been definitively confirmed whether that figure is Gregory Moore himself or someone he directed to carry out the attack. The footage cannot be enhanced beyond what it already shows, and the indictment acknowledges this uncertainty by referring to either Gregory or an unknown co-conspirator. One of Aliza's friends, Maria, who has spoken publicly about the case for years, said she always wondered whether the person running was someone Gregory had hired. Others who have followed the case closely believe it was Gregory himself. That question may be answered at trial, or it may not. Gregory posted a $2 million cash bond in the summer of 2025 and was released from custody. He is restricted from possessing firearms, cannot hold a passport, cannot travel outside the state, and is subject to GPS monitoring. Certain locations are off limits to protect the Sherman family. On January 8th, 2026, a pretrial hearing was held. The court set a trial date for September 14th, 2026. Both sides agreed to at least 2 weeks for the proceedings. Gregory has pleaded not guilty to all charges. His defense attorney stated that when his client says not guilty, that means the case is going to trial and that Gregory Moore has much to say in his own defense. A judge also granted a request to independently test DNA found on a watch recovered from the crime scene. There is a layer to this case that goes beyond the legal proceedings, beyond the evidence in the timeline and the indictment language. Sits in something harder to articulate. Aliza Sherman went to that sidewalk because she trusted the person who told her to be there. She had been through one of the most emotionally draining experiences a person can go through. She was close to the end of it. She believed she was in capable hands. She had no reason to think otherwise. The person she trusted with her legal protection during one of the most vulnerable periods of her life is now accused of engineering her death to prevent her from walking into a courtroom the following morning. Whether the allegations are proven in court remains to be seen. That process is still ahead. But the sheer weight of what is being alleged that someone could plan for months, use the machinery of professional trust as cover, and carry out something that brutal and that calculated, it forces a reckoning with something most people prefer not to think about too directly. That the people we turn to in moments of vulnerability are not always who we believe them to be. And yet, there is something else this case holds. Something that does not belong to the darkness of it. There are families alive in the world today because Aliza Sherman showed up for them. She was present at the beginning of their stories. She carried them through fear and uncertainty and brought them to moments of joy that would define the rest of their lives. That is not erased by what happened on a downtown sidewalk in Cleveland on a Sunday afternoon. It lives in the people she helped, in the children who exist because she cared, in a bench in a park, in the friends who still gather every year with signs. Jan, her best friend, said they talked every day, sometimes several times a day. The last message she received from Aliza that day ended the way their messages always ended. Thanks for our talk. Love you. Jan wrote back, I love you too. A text message, 2 minutes before everything changed. The trial of Gregory Moore is scheduled to begin in September 2026. After 12 years, the people who loved Aliza Sherman will be in that courtroom watching.